The blood pooled beneath her fingernails, mixing with the brown dust that seemed to coat everything in Abilene, Kansas, and Elena Morales wondered if her hands would ever look delicate again. The year was 1875, and the cattle town thrived with the chaos of drovers, gamblers, and those seeking fortune in the expanding West. Elena had arrived 3 months prior from San Antonio, carrying nothing but a leather satchel and the sewing skills her grandmother had taught her before consumption took her life. The sign above her small shop read Morales Leather Goods in hand-painted letters, and though business was steady, the work was brutal. Saddles needed mending, chaps required reinforcement, and the cowboys who thundered through town on their way north always needed something fixed, replaced, or custom-made. She worked by lamplight most evenings, her fingers moving through tough leather that resisted every stitch. The needle pushed through the material with force that left her fingertips raw and bleeding by the end of each day. She was 22 years old, with dark hair she kept pinned back and eyes that held both determination and exhaustion. Her father had been a vaquero, her mother a seamstress, and she carried both their skills in her capable hands. But tonight, as she finished the last stitches on a rifle scabbard, she could barely flex her fingers without wincing. The shop door opened with a creak, letting in the cooling evening air and a man she had seen around town but never spoken to. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water after rain. His hat hung low, shadowing a face that was handsome in a rugged, honest way. He wore dusty chaps and a blue shirt faded from too many washings, and his boots carried the worn look of a working cowboy rather than a town dandy. "I know it is late," he said, his voice carrying a soft drawl that suggested Texas origins. "But my saddle cinch broke about 5 miles out and I need it fixed before dawn. Got to ride out with the Rocking M outfit heading north." Elena looked up from her work, suppressing the urge to cradle her aching hands. "I can do it. Let me see." He brought the saddle in, hefting it easily despite its weight, and set it on her workbench. The leather cinch had split clean through, likely from age and hard use. "This will take me a few hours," she said honestly. "I have to cut new leather and stitch it properly, or it will fail you on the trail." "I can wait," he said, then noticed the way she held her hands, the blood on her fingertips, his brow furrowed with concern. "Ma'am, your hands are torn up something fierce." "It is the work," Elena said, trying to sound dismissive, but her voice betrayed her pain. "Leather is not forgiving." The cowboy looked at her for a long moment, then moved toward her with surprising gentleness. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared back out into the darkening street. Elena stood confused, wondering if he had changed his mind about the repair, but he returned minutes later carrying a small tin and a clean cloth. "This is horse salve," he explained, "but it works just as well on people. My mother used it on all of us growing up. Heals cuts and takes away the sting." He opened the tin, revealing a pale ointment that smelled of herbs and beeswax. "I should work on your saddle," Elena protested weakly. "And I should not stand by while someone suffers on my account," he countered. He pulled up a stool and sat across from her. "May I?" Something in his earnest expression made Elena nod. She extended her hands and he took them carefully, as if they were something precious. His own hands were calloused and strong, marked by rope burns and the hard work of cattle driving, yet his touch was impossibly gentle. He dipped the cloth in water from her pitcher, carefully cleaning the blood and dust from her fingertips. Each touch sent a strange warmth through her chest that had nothing to do with pain. "What is your name?" she asked softly. "James Farrell," he replied, concentrating on her hands. "Most folks call me Jamie. I have been working cattle since I was 14, saved up enough to join this drive north. Plan to start my own spread someday if I can get the money together." "Elena Morales," she said. "I came here from Texas to start this business. My family is all gone now, so I thought I would make my own way." His eyes lifted to meet hers, and she saw sympathy there, but also respect. "That takes courage," he said. "Most women would have found a husband to provide for them." Most women did not have a grandmother who taught them to make a saddle that could last 20 years, Elena replied with a small smile. Jamie smiled back, and the expression transformed his face, making him seem younger and more open. He began applying the salve to her fingertips with careful attention, working it gently into each raw spot. The ointment cooled and soothed immediately, and Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. But more than the physical relief, she felt something else, a connection forming in the quiet intimacy of this moment, a stranger caring for her wounds without expectation or judgment. "You do not have to do this," she said, though she made no move to pull away. "I know," Jamie said. "But my mother always said you could tell the measure of a person by how they treat those who are hurting. And besides, any woman who works this hard deserves someone to look after her now and then." He held her hands even after the salve was applied, his thumbs moving in small circles over her palms. The gesture felt protective and tender, and Elena found herself noticing details about him. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the steadiness in his gaze that suggested reliability. "I should let you work," he finally said, though he seemed reluctant to release her hands. "The sooner you finish, the sooner you can rest." Elena felt a strange disappointment as his warmth left her skin, but she turned to the saddle with renewed energy. Her fingers felt better already, and she worked quickly, cutting new leather from her best stock. Jamie watched her work with evident admiration, asking questions about her technique and listening intently to her explanations. She told him about learning the trade from her grandmother, about the different types of stitches for different purposes, about how to read leather for its strengths and weaknesses. "You talk about it like it is alive," Jamie observed. "In a way it is," Elena said, her needle moving steadily. "It came from a living creature, and it remembers that. You have to work with its nature, not against it." As she stitched, they talked. Jamie told her about growing up in Texas, about his parents' small farm and his 4 younger siblings. His father had died in the war, and his mother had worked herself to exhaustion keeping them fed. He sent money home when he could, but cattle driving was uncertain work. He spoke of the trail, of river crossings and stampedes, of nights under stars so thick they looked like spilled milk across the sky. Elena shared her own stories, of her father teaching her to ride before she could walk properly, of her mother's death when she was 12, of her grandmother raising her with firm hands and a soft heart. She spoke of the loneliness of this new life, of building something from nothing, of falling into bed each night too tired to feel anything but grateful for survival. "Do you ever regret it?" Jamie asked. "Coming here alone?" Elena considered this, her needle pausing. "I regret that I have no family left, but I do not regret trying to build something of my own, even if it means raw fingers and lonely evenings." "Maybe the evenings do not have to be so lonely," Jamie said quietly. Elena looked up, meeting his gaze across the lamplight. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. "You are leaving at dawn," she reminded him, though her heart quickened. "The drive will take 3 months, maybe 4, Jamie said, "but I will come back through Abilene. We always do, bringing the next herd north. I could come back through in the fall if you would want me to." "I might want that," Elena admitted, feeling bold and shy all at once. She finished the cinch as midnight approached, testing every stitch twice to ensure its strength. Jamie watched her work with an expression that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced since her grandmother died. When she declared it finished, he paid her double the asked price, waving away her protests. "For the late hour," he insisted, "and for the company." "Best evening I have spent in a long time." At the door, he hesitated. "Elena, I know this is sudden and I am just a cowboy with more dreams than dollars, but I meant what I said. I will come back. If you will wait for me, I will come back." "I will wait," Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Be safe on the trail, Jamie Farrell." He took her hand once more, carefully, mindful of her healing fingers, and pressed his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet that it made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Then he was gone, leading his horse into the darkness, the repaired saddle on its back. Elena stood in her doorway long after he disappeared, touching her fingers to her lips and wondering how a single evening could shift the entire landscape of her life. The months that followed were the longest Elena had ever known. She threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, and business continued to grow. She hired a young boy named Thomas to help with deliveries and basic tasks, which gave her hands some relief. The salve Jamie had left with her proved remarkably effective, and she used it sparingly, making it last, each application a reminder of his gentle care. She asked subtly about cattle drives, learning the routes and timelines. The Rocking M outfit would have reached the railheads in Kansas by late summer, and if they returned with another herd, it would be September or October before they came through again. She tried not to count the days, but found herself doing it anyway, marking time by the changing seasons. Summer heat baked the streets of Abilene into hard-packed corridors of dust. Elena installed better ventilation in her shop and worked during the cooler morning and evening hours. She made friends with other shopkeepers, particularly Martha Chen, who ran the general store with her husband. Martha was Chinese, had come to America as a child, and understood the challenges of being a woman building a business in a rough town. They took tea together on Sunday afternoons, and Elena found herself confiding about Jamie. "A cowboy who comes back is a rare thing," Martha said wisely. "But you will know by how he looks at you when you see him again. Some men promise everything and deliver nothing. Others promise little and give you the world." Elena thought about Jamie's careful hands, his genuine questions, the way he had listened to her as if her words mattered. She wanted to believe he would return, but the West was dangerous, and cattle drives more so. Men died from storms, from stampedes, from simple accidents that turned fatal far from any doctor. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of gold in the cottonwood leaves. Elena found herself watching the street more often, her heart jumping at every tall cowboy who walked past. But none of them were Jamie, and as the month wore on, she began to fear the worst. Then, on an October afternoon when the sky was impossibly blue and the air smelled of smoke from distant fires, she heard a familiar voice say, "I was hoping you would still be here." Elena dropped the leather she was holding and turned so quickly she nearly knocked over her lamp. Jamie stood in the doorway, thinner than she remembered, sun-darkened and trail-worn, but smiling at her with such warmth that she felt it in her bones. "You came back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I said I would." He stepped inside, removing his hat. "I thought about you every day on that trail, wondered if you were real or if I had imagined the whole evening." Elena crossed the shop floor in quick steps and, throwing caution and propriety aside, wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, and she felt his heart beating strong and steady against her cheek. He smelled of trail dust and horses and sunshine, and she breathed him in like air after drowning. "I was afraid something had happened to you," she admitted against his chest. "We had some trouble with river crossings, and I took a kick from a spooked horse that laid me up for a week," Jamie said, his hand stroking her hair. "But I was not about to let anything keep me from coming back to you." They stood holding each other for a long moment before Elena stepped back, suddenly aware of how bold she had been. But Jamie was smiling, his eyes bright with happiness, and she could not bring herself to feel embarrassed. "How long can you stay?" she asked. "3 days," he said. "Then I have to ride south to meet up with the next drive. But Elena, I have been thinking. This life, driving cattle back and forth, it pays, but it is no way to build a future. I have been saving my wages, and I have nearly enough to put a down payment on some land. There is a parcel about 10 miles from here, good grass and water, where I could start a small ranch. It would be hard work and probably years before it turned a real profit, but it would be mine. Ours, if you would consider it." Elena's breath caught. Jamie, you have only known me for one evening. I know, he said, and I am not asking you to marry me today, but I am asking if I can court you properly. If I can write to you and come see you when I can, and if, when I get that land, you might consider being part of what I am building. The same way I want to be part of what you are building here. Elena thought about the loneliness of the past months, about the moment he had held her raw fingers and applied salve with such tenderness, about how naturally they had talked through that long night. She thought about Martha's words about men who promised little and gave everything. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. The 3 days Jamie spent in Abilene passed like water through cupped hands, too fast and too precious. He helped her in the shop, proving surprisingly skilled with leatherwork despite his protests that he was merely a ranch hand. They took meals together at the boarding house, earning curious looks from other diners but ignoring them. He told her more stories of the trail, and she shared her dreams of expanding her business, maybe hiring other craftspeople, creating a real trade shop. On the second evening, they walked along the edge of town where the prairie stretched endless and gold in the sunset. Jamie took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and told her about the land he wanted to buy. He described it in such vivid detail that she could almost see it. A creek that ran year-round, a gentle rise that would be perfect for a house, grassland that could support cattle and horses. I keep imagining you there, he admitted. In a house with real windows and a big workroom for your leather, maybe a barn where we could raise good horses. I know it is just a dream right now, but I can see it so clearly. I can see it too, Elena said softly. Tell me more. They sat on a flat rock as darkness fell, and Jamie painted pictures with his words of the life they might build together. He spoke of starting small, with just a few head of cattle and a modest house, then growing slowly and steadily. He talked about wanting children someday, about teaching them to ride and work the land. Elena added her own dreams, about continuing her leather business, about the satisfaction of creating beautiful, lasting things with her hands. We make sense together, Jamie said, turning to face her. I felt it that first night, and I feel it even more now, like we are two parts of the same whole. Elena knew what he meant. Being with Jamie felt effortless, natural, like coming home after a long journey. She leaned her head on his shoulder and watched the stars emerge, feeling more hopeful about the future than she had in years. On the third day, Jamie had to leave. He held her at dawn outside her shop, neither of them wanting to let go. I will write you, he promised. Every town that has a post office I will send a letter, and I will be back in the spring after the winter. By then, I should have enough saved for the land. Be careful, Elena said, touching his face. Come back to me whole and healthy. Always, he promised, and kissed her forehead with such tenderness that she felt tears slide down her cheeks. She watched him ride south, sitting tall in his saddle, and only when he was completely out of sight did she allow herself to cry fully. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of hope, of longing, of joy at having found someone who saw her not as a charity case or an oddity, but as a partner and an equal. The letters began arriving within 2 weeks. Jamie's handwriting was neat and careful, and his words painted pictures of life on the trail. He wrote about close calls with rustlers, about a young calf he had helped deliver during a thunderstorm, about the other cowboys on the drive and their various quirks and stories. But mostly, he wrote about missing her, about counting the days until spring, about the land he was determined to buy. Elena wrote back just as faithfully, telling him about new commissions, about improvements she was making to the shop, about the changing town as winter approached. She told him about her fears and hopes, about the satisfaction of completing a particularly difficult saddle, about how much she missed his presence. Winter came hard that year, with bitter winds and heavy snows that shut down travel for weeks at a time. Elena was grateful for her sturdy shop building and the wood stove that kept it warm. She worked by firelight on long evenings, creating some of her finest pieces yet. A lady's saddle with intricate tooling, a set of matched holsters for a wealthy rancher, a beautifully detailed rifle scabbard that she hoped to give Jamie when he returned. Martha checked on her regularly, bringing soup and company. "You have that look," Martha observed one afternoon as they sat by the stove, "the look of a woman in love." "Is it that obvious?" Elena asked, smiling despite herself. "To another woman, yes. Does it frighten you?" Elena considered this. "Sometimes, we have spent so little time together. What if I am wrong about him? What if he is wrong about me?" "Then you will discover it and deal with it," Martha said practically. "But from what you have told me, he sounds like a good man, and good men are worth the risk." The winter months also brought challenges. A drunk cowboy tried to force his way into her shop one evening, and Elena had to threaten him with her leather shears before he stumbled away. She wrote to Jamie about it, trying to make it sound less frightening than it had been, but his response was immediate and concerned. He wrote that he hated being so far away when she might need protection, and promised that when he returned, he would make sure everyone in town knew she was spoken for. The possessiveness in his words should have annoyed her, but instead it made her feel cherished. She was capable of defending herself, but it was comforting to know someone cared about her safety, that she was not alone in the world anymore. Spring arrived slowly, teasing with warm days followed by late freezes. But eventually the snow melted, the prairie turned green, and Elena knew Jamie would be coming soon. She found herself checking her appearance more often, wearing her good dress on days when she thought he might arrive, scanning the street with eager eyes. He came on a warm April morning when the cottonwoods were just starting to bud. Elena saw him through her window and was out the door before she could think, running across the dusty street in a way that was completely improper and absolutely necessary. He caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "I have the land," he said, setting her down but not letting her go. "I signed the papers yesterday. It is ours, Elena, if you still want it." "Show me," she said breathlessly. "I want to see it." They rode out that afternoon, Elena behind him on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist. The land was everything he had described: rolling prairie with good grass, a creek lined with cottonwoods, a rise that offered views of the surrounding country. She could imagine it all so clearly: a house, a barn, horses grazing, a life built together. "What do you think?" Jamie asked, helping her down from the horse. He looked nervous, as if her opinion might change everything. "I think it is perfect," Elena said honestly. "I think we could build something wonderful here." Jamie took her hands, the same way he had that first night, with the same careful gentleness. "Elena Morales, I love you. I have loved you since you looked up at me with exhaustion in your eyes but determination in your voice. I love your strength and your skill and your courage. I am just a cowboy with a piece of land and big dreams, but if you will have me, I promise to spend every day trying to build a life worthy of you." "You already have," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "You saw me when I felt invisible. You cared for me when I was hurting. You kept every promise you made. Jamie Farrell, I love you too, and yes, yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Elena felt the last pieces of her guarded heart open fully. This was right. This was real. This was the beginning of everything she had hoped for, but never quite believed possible. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Abilene. Martha and her husband stood as witnesses, along with several of the other townspeople who had become Elena's friends. Jamie wore his best shirt and a new vest, and Elena wore a dress of deep blue that Martha had helped her make. She carried wildflowers from their land, and when Jamie slipped a simple gold band on her finger, she felt a completeness she had never known before. "I have never been happier," she whispered as they stood together at the altar. "Neither have I," Jamie replied, his eyes bright with emotion. "And I plan to make sure you stay happy for the rest of our lives." The first years of their marriage were marked by hard work and simple joys. They built a small house on their land, just 2 rooms to start, with plans to expand as they could afford it. Elena moved her leather business to a workroom Jamie built for her and found that working from home suited her better than the shop in town. She took commissions that could be delivered once a week and focused on higher quality pieces that commanded better prices. Jamie started their herd with 20 head of cattle and 3 good horses. He worked from dawn until dark, building fences, digging irrigation ditches, learning the rhythms of their land. Elena worked beside him when she could, and in the evenings they would sit on their porch watching the sunset, talking about their day and their dreams. Money was tight, but they were happy. Elena had never imagined that such simple things could bring such contentment, cooking meals together, falling asleep in Jamie's arms, waking to his smile. He was patient and kind, strong when needed but never harsh, and he treated her always as an equal partner in their enterprise. Their first real test came in the summer of 1877, when drought threatened to destroy their grass and water. The creek ran lower than Jamie had ever seen it, and their cattle grew thin. Elena sold several pieces of jewelry her grandmother had left her, and they bought hay from farmers to the east, hauling it in on their wagon load by load. Jamie worked himself nearly to exhaustion, and Elena spent long hours helping him distribute feed and check on every animal. One evening, Elena found Jamie sitting by the depleted creek, his head in his hands. She sat beside him, taking his calloused hand in hers. "We will survive this," she said firmly. "What if we do not?" Jamie asked, and she heard the fear in his voice. "What if I have brought you to this land only to fail?" "Then we will have failed together," Elena said, "but I do not believe we will fail. We are stronger than this drought, Jamie. We will endure." He pulled her close and they sat together as darkness fell. The next day, clouds appeared on the horizon, and by evening, rain was falling in sheets. The drought broke, the grass recovered, and their cattle survived. Jamie always said it was Elena's faith that saved them, but Elena knew it was their partnership, their refusal to give up on each other or their dreams. In 1878, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They were doing well enough now, but a child would bring new challenges and responsibilities. Elena continued her leather work through the pregnancy, though Jamie fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less. "I am pregnant, not ill," she reminded him with amusement. "Women have been having babies while working since the beginning of time." "Not my wife," Jamie said stubbornly. "Not if I can help it." Their son was born in February of 1879 during a snowstorm that trapped them in their small house for 3 days. Martha had come to help with the birth, along with the doctor from town, and Elena labored through a long night while Jamie paced and worried. But when the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling, Jamie cried as he held his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Jamie whispered, looking at Elena with such love and gratitude that she felt her heart might burst. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." They named him Daniel after Elena's father, and he became the center of their world. Elena fashioned a cradle board so she could carry him while she worked, and Jamie built a larger addition to their house so Daniel could have his own room as he grew. The baby thrived, growing strong and curious, with his father's light eyes and his mother's dark hair. As Daniel learned to walk and then to run, Elena and Jamie's ranch continued to grow. They added more cattle, bought better breeding stock, and began developing a reputation for quality animals. Elena's leather business remained steady, and she trained 2 young women from town in the craft, pleased to pass on the knowledge her grandmother had given her. The years unfolded with their share of joys and sorrows. They lost cattle to harsh winters and celebrated good seasons with abundant calves. Elena miscarried a second pregnancy in 1881, and they grieved together, holding each other through the pain. But in 1882, their daughter was born, a tiny fierce thing they named Rose after Jamie's mother. And in 1884, another son arrived, whom they called Samuel. Their house expanded with their family, growing from 2 rooms to 6, with a proper workshop for Elena and a barn that could shelter their growing herd through any weather. Daniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses, and showed early skill with leatherwork. Rose was bold and adventurous, constantly giving her parents minor heart attacks with her fearless climbing and exploring. Samuel was gentle and sweet, content to sit with his mother and listen to stories. Through it all, Jamie and Elena's love deepened and strengthened. They had their arguments, of course, disagreements about money or child rearing or which cattle to sell and which to keep. But they had learned early to talk through their conflicts, to listen to each other, to remember that they were partners in all things. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jamie took Elena back to the spot where he had proposed. The land had changed dramatically in a decade. Where there had been open prairie, now there were fences and cattle, a sturdy house and barn, corrals and gardens. But the view was still breathtaking and the creek still ran clear and cool. "Do you remember what I said that day?" Jamie asked, holding her hand as they surveyed their domain. "You said you were just a cowboy with a piece of land and big dreams," Elena replied, smiling. "I was wrong," Jamie said. "I was a cowboy who had found the other half of his soul. You made all of this possible, Elena, not just the ranch but the life we have built. You took a chance on me when I had nothing but promises, and you have made every one of those promises come true." "We made them come true together," Elena corrected. She thought back to that first night, her fingers raw from work. This man she barely knew caring for her wounds with such unexpected tenderness. She thought about all the days and nights since, the struggles and triumphs, the ordinary moments that had woven together into an extraordinary life. "I would do it all again," she said softly. "Every hard day, every challenge, every moment of doubt, because all of it led here to this life with you." Jamie kissed her, sweet and familiar and still capable of making her heart race. "I love you, Elena Farrell, more with every passing year." "And I love you," Elena replied, "my cowboy who came back." They stood together as the sun set over their land, watching the cattle graze and their children play in the distance. The future stretched before them, unknown and full of possibility, but they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, with love and determination and faith in each other. The years continued to unfold, bringing more changes and challenges. Daniel grew into a fine horseman and took over much of the daily ranch work, allowing Jamie to focus on breeding and sales. He had inherited his mother's careful attention to detail and his father's instinct for animals, and under his management, their herd's reputation grew throughout Kansas and beyond. Rose surprised them all by showing a talent for business. At 16, she convinced her parents to let her handle their accounts and sales, and within a year had increased their profits by negotiating better prices and finding new markets for their cattle. She had her mother's fierce independence and her father's charm, a combination that served her well in the male-dominated world of cattle trading. Samuel remained gentle-hearted, but proved to have an unexpected gift for healing. He worked with sick and injured animals with patience and intuition, and eventually went to study veterinary medicine in Kansas City. Elena and Jamie were immensely proud, though they missed him terribly during his years away. Elena's leather business evolved as she aged. Her hands, though scarred from decades of work, remained skilled, and she focused on teaching and design while her apprentices did much of the physical stitching. She developed patterns that were sought after across the West, and her saddles became prized possessions that were passed down through generations. Jamie's hair turned silver, and his face bore deep lines from years of sun and wind, but Elena thought he had never been more handsome. He moved a bit slower than he once had and complained about his joints on cold mornings, but he remained strong and capable, a steady presence in their family and community. They faced sorrows as the years passed. Jamie's mother died in 1889, and though they had visited her regularly and helped support her, Jamie grieved deeply for the woman who had taught him kindness and compassion. Elena held him through his tears and helped him remember her with joy rather than just sadness. Martha Chen, Elena's dear friend, passed away in 1892 after a short illness. Elena felt the loss keenly, remembering how Martha had been her first real friend in Abilene, how she had offered wisdom and companionship during those early lonely years. At the funeral, Elena spoke about friendship across differences, about the bond between two women who had both built lives in a hard land. But there were many joys as well. Daniel married a rancher's daughter named Sarah in 1891, and they built a house on the far edge of Elena and Jamie's land, expanding the family operation. Their first child, a boy they named James after his grandfather, was born in 1892, and Elena discovered the unexpected delight of being a grandmother. Rose fell in love with a railroad engineer named Thomas, and though Elena worried about her daughter moving away, she saw the genuine love between them and gave her blessing. They settled in Denver, and Rose wrote long letters home describing the growing city and their adventures there. Samuel returned from his studies in 1893 and established a veterinary practice in Abilene. He remained unmarried, claiming he was too busy caring for animals to court properly, but Elena suspected he simply had not met the right person yet. He visited the ranch often, checking on their cattle and horses, and Elena treasured every moment with her youngest child. As the 19th century drew to a close, Elena and Jamie found themselves in their 40s, still healthy and active but increasingly aware of their mortality. They talked about the future, about how to divide the ranch between their children, about what would happen when they were gone. "I am not ready to be gone," Jamie said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching another spectacular sunset. "There is still so much I want to do with you." "Then we will do it," Elena said simply. "We will keep living fully for as long as we can." And they did. They traveled to Denver to visit Rose and her growing family. They attended Daniel's children's birthdays and school performances. They hosted large gatherings at the ranch, filling their house with family and friends and laughter. They took long rides across their land, remembering how it had looked when they first claimed it, marveling at how it had grown and changed. On quiet evenings, they would sit together and talk about their life, remembering key moments and small details. Jamie never forgot to tell Elena that he loved her, and she never tired of hearing it. Sometimes, when her hands ached from old injuries and decades of work, Jamie would warm some salve and massage it gently into her fingers, the same way he had that very first night. "You remember?" he would ask, his touch still gentle after all these years. "I remember everything," Elena would reply. "How could I forget the night that changed my entire life?" In 1898, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a large party at the ranch. All three of their children were there, along with grandchildren, friends, and neighboring ranchers. Daniel gave a toast thanking his parents for showing him what a true partnership looked like. Rose spoke about her mother's strength and her father's kindness. Samuel simply said that he hoped someday to find a love even half as strong as theirs. As the party wound down and guests departed, Elena and Jamie found themselves alone under the stars, much as they had been on so many nights throughout their marriage. Jamie pulled Elena close, and they swayed together to music only they could hear. 20 years, Jamie said wonderingly. "It has gone so fast. And yet I feel like I have known you forever," Elena replied, "like we have always been together." "Here is to 20 more, Jamie said, kissing her softly. "To 50 more, Elena countered with a smile. They laughed together, these two people who had built a life from raw hands and tender care, from promises kept and dreams realized, from love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something that would last long beyond their own lifetimes. The new century arrived with hope and uncertainty. The Wild West they had known was changing rapidly. Towns grew into cities, railroads connected distant places, and the open range was increasingly divided by fences and farms. But on their ranch, Elena and Jamie maintained the values that had guided them from the beginning. Hard work, honest dealing, care for the land and animals, and above all, love for each other and their family. Daniel proved to be a natural successor, managing the ranch with skill and innovation while respecting the foundation his parents had built. He and Sarah had 4 children eventually, and the ranch house rang with young voices again. Elena loved teaching her grandchildren leatherwork, passing down the skills her own grandmother had taught her so many years ago. Rose thrived in Denver, where she and Thomas raised 3 children, and where Rose became involved in women's business organizations. She wrote often, and her letters were full of affection and appreciation for the example her parents had set. Samuel eventually met a young teacher named Grace, and they married in 1902 in a ceremony that had Elena crying happy tears. Grace was kind and intelligent, and she clearly adored Samuel. They settled in Abilene, and Grace often accompanied Samuel on his veterinary calls, learning to assist him and forming her own bond with the animals they treated. As Elena and Jamie entered their 50s, they gradually stepped back from daily ranch operations, trusting Daniel and Sarah to manage the cattle while they focused on broader planning and family matters. Jamie spent more time breaking and training horses, work he had always loved, and Elena devoted herself to her leather art, creating pieces of stunning beauty and complexity. They took more time for each other, for long rides and quiet conversations, for holding hands and watching grandchildren play. The passion that had drawn them together had evolved into something deeper and more enduring, a love that was woven into every aspect of their lives. In 1905, on a warm spring day that reminded Elena of their wedding day, they rode out to their special place by the creek. The cottonwoods were in full leaf, and wildflowers carpeted the prairie. They spread a blanket and sat together, comfortable in the silence that only people who truly know each other can share. "I have been thinking," Jamie said eventually, "about that first night in your shop." "I think about it often," Elena admitted. "How close I came to sending you away, to saying I could not fix your saddle until morning." "I would have come back," Jamie said with certainty. "Maybe not that same night, but eventually, I think we were meant to find each other." "I think so too," Elena said. She looked at her hands, scarred and calloused but still strong, still capable. "These hands have made so many things over the years. Saddles and holsters, baby shoes and belts, but the best thing they ever helped me make was this life with you." Jamie raised her hands to his lips, kissing each finger with the same reverence he had shown 30 years earlier. "Your hands are beautiful," he said. "They tell the story of your strength, your skill, your dedication. Every scar is a mark of honor." Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks, moved by his words and by the weight of all their years together. "I was so alone before you came into my life," she said. "I thought I was content, thought my work was enough. But you showed me what it means to truly live, to share every joy and burden with someone who sees you and loves you completely." "You did the same for me," Jamie said, his own eyes wet. "I was just drifting, working cattle and saving money, but not really building toward anything meaningful. You gave me purpose and direction. You gave me a home, not just a house, but a true home, full of love and life." They held each other as the afternoon light turned golden, two people who had grown old together but whose love remained as fresh and vital as it had been on that night when a cowboy had cared for a seamstress's raw fingers with unexpected tenderness. The years rolled on, bringing more changes. The ranch continued to prosper under Daniel's management, expanding and modernizing while maintaining its core values. Elena and Jamie became great-grandparents, holding tiny babies and marveling at how their family had grown from just the two of them into this thriving network of descendants. They faced health challenges as they aged. Jamie developed problems with his heart, and Elena's joints became increasingly arthritic. But they cared for each other through every difficulty, just as they always had, each one's first concern always being the other's well-being. In 1910, as they approached their 32nd wedding anniversary, they sat on their porch one evening watching the sunset. Their hair was silver now, their faces deeply lined, their bodies marked by decades of hard work. But their hands were still joined, fingers intertwined, and the love in their eyes remained undimmed. "Do you have any regrets?" Elena asked, a question she had never quite dared to voice before. Jamie was quiet for a long moment, considering seriously. "I regret every moment I have caused you pain or worry," he said finally. "I regret the baby we lost, the hard times when money was tight, the times I was short-tempered or thoughtless, but I do not regret a single major choice we have made together. This life, this family, this love, it is everything I could have hoped for and more than I deserved." "You deserved all of it," Elena said fiercely. "You are the best man I have ever known, Jamie Farrell. You have been my partner, my love, my home for more than 3 decades. You kept every promise you made to me that first night, and you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We built it together," Jamie reminded her. "Every fence post, every success, every child raised and grandchild loved, we did it all together." "Together," Elena echoed, squeezing his hand. "Always together." As darkness fell and stars emerged in the vast prairie sky, they remained on their porch, comfortable and content in each other's presence. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel and Sarah putting the youngest grandchildren to bed, the sounds of family continuing the legacy Elena and Jamie had begun so many years ago. They had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. A ranch, yes, but more than that, a family built on love and respect and partnership. Their children had learned from their example, and their grandchildren were learning too, understanding that true success was measured not in money or land but in relationships nurtured and commitments honored. Elena thought about the young woman she had been, working alone in her shop with raw, bleeding fingers, wondering if she would ever find connection or belonging. She thought about the cowboy who had walked through her door, bringing not just a saddle to be repaired but the possibility of everything she had secretly yearned for. "Thank you," she whispered to Jamie in the darkness. "For what?" he asked, though his voice suggested he knew. "For seeing me when I felt invisible, for caring when I thought no one would, for staying when you could have left, for loving me through every season of our lives." Jamie turned to her, his weathered face visible in the starlight, and cupped her cheek with his hand. "You made me better than I would have been alone," he said. "You challenged me, supported me, believed in me. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 30 years of history and promised whatever years remained. When they finally rose and went inside, it was hand in hand, as they had done everything for 3 decades, as they would continue to do for as long as they both drew breath. The years that followed were gentler, marked more by the joys of watching their family flourish than by the struggles of building and surviving. Elena and Jamie became the beloved elders of their extended family, the ones everyone turned to for advice and wisdom, for stories of the old days and reassurance in difficult times. Elena continued her leather work on a smaller scale, creating special pieces for family members. A custom saddle for a grandson's 18th birthday, a beautiful belt for a granddaughter's wedding, small gifts that carried her love and skill. Her hands were twisted now with arthritis, but she worked slowly and carefully, and the results were still beautiful. Jamie spent his days with his horses, the animals he had always loved best. He moved more slowly now, but the horses seemed to understand and were patient with him. Young great-grandchildren would sit on the fence and watch him work, learning from his gentle methods and calm persistence. Their love story became something of a legend in the community. People pointed to them as an example of what marriage could be when built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Young couples came to them for advice, and Elena and Jamie always said the same things. Communicate honestly, work together, never stop caring for each other. Remember why you fell in love even when times are hard. In the spring of 1915, as they approached their 37th anniversary, Jamie's heart finally gave out. He died peacefully in his sleep, Elena beside him as she had been for nearly 4 decades. His last words, spoken the evening before, had been "I love you," and Elena held those words close as she grieved. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren surrounded Elena, offering comfort and support. Ranchers from across the state came to pay respects to a man who had been fair and honest in all his dealings. Friends and neighbors spoke of Jamie's kindness, his integrity, his devotion to his family. But it was Elena who gave the final words, standing straight despite her grief, her voice strong as she spoke about the man she had loved. "He came into my shop 39 years ago," she said, "and he saw not just a woman with raw, bleeding hands, but a person worthy of care and tenderness." That was who Jamie was, someone who noticed suffering and moved to ease it, who saw potential and helped it flourish, who loved with his whole heart and never counted the cost. He gave me everything: a home, a family, a partnership that sustained and enriched every day of my life. I will miss him until I draw my last breath, but I am so grateful, so profoundly grateful that I was given the gift of loving him and being loved by him. The grief was intense, but Elena weathered it with the strength she had developed over a lifetime of facing challenges. Her children stayed close, making sure she was never alone for long. Daniel and Sarah invited her to live with them in the main house, but Elena chose to remain in the home she and Jamie had built, surrounded by memories and the life they had created together. She found comfort in her work, in her family, in the knowledge that Jamie would have wanted her to keep living fully. She told stories about him to the youngest great-grandchildren, making sure they knew the man he had been. She tended his grave with flowers from their land, speaking to him as if he could hear, telling him about the family and the ranch and how much she missed him. 2 years after Jamie's death, Elena gathered her family for a special occasion. She had created one final masterpiece, a saddle more beautiful than anything she had ever made, with intricate tooling that told the story of her life with Jamie. There were images of their land, their cattle, their children, small details that captured their journey from that first night to their last years together. "This is my legacy," she told her assembled family. "Not just the leather work, but the story it tells. Your father and I built something precious, something worth preserving and passing down. We showed you that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made new every day through hard times and good. We showed you that true partnership means supporting each other's dreams while building shared ones. We showed you that with faith, work, and love, anything is possible." She gave the saddle to Daniel, to be kept in the family and passed down through generations, a tangible reminder of the love story that had founded their dynasty. And she gave each of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren a small leather piece she had crafted specially for them, each one unique, each one carrying her love. Elena lived 3 more years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She died peacefully in the autumn of 1920 at the age of 67, surrounded by her family in the home she had shared with Jamie. Her last words were "Tell him I am coming," and her children knew she meant Jamie, that even after 5 years apart, her heart belonged to him still. They buried her beside Jamie on a rise overlooking their land, under the endless prairie sky they had both loved. The funeral was as well attended as his had been, with people coming from across the state to honor a woman who had been a pioneer in her own right, a skilled artisan, a devoted mother, and above all, one half of a love story that had inspired everyone who witnessed it. Daniel stood at her grave and spoke about his mother's strength, her kindness, her unwavering support of her family. Rose, now gray-haired herself, talked about how her mother had taught her that women could be both fierce and gentle, that strength came in many forms. Samuel, his voice breaking with emotion, simply said that his parents had shown him what it meant to truly love another person, and that he hoped he could live up to their example. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to prosper under Daniel's leadership and eventually under his children's management. Elena's leather pieces became treasured family heirlooms, each one carrying her skill and her story. The special saddle she had created was displayed in the ranch house, where every new generation learned the story it told. Young couples in the family were told about Elena and Jamie, about raw fingers tended with salve, about promises kept through decades, about love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something that shaped generations. They learned that true romance was not just passionate moments, but also quiet care, not just grand gestures, but also daily choices to honor and support each other. The land Elena and Jamie had claimed continued to nourish their descendants, providing not just livelihood but also connection to the past and hope for the future. Great-great-grandchildren rode the same hills Elena and Jamie had ridden, swam in the same creek, watched sunsets from the same special place where Jamie had proposed, and where they had spent so many peaceful hours together. And in the hearts of everyone who descended from that union of a lonely seamstress and a gentle cowboy, the love story lived on. It lived in the way they treated their spouses, in the values they held dear, in the understanding that the greatest achievements in life are not measured in money or fame but in love given and received, in commitments honored, in families nurtured. Elena had started with raw, bleeding fingers, working alone and wondering if she would always be solitary. Jamie had offered salve and comfort, seeing not just her pain but her worth. From that single act of kindness, from that moment of genuine care, had grown a love that transcended their individual lives, that became woven into the land itself, that shaped the destinies of everyone who came after them. Their story was simple in its outline. Two people met, fell in love, built a life together. But in its living, it had been profound, marked by countless small choices to cherish and support each other, by weathering storms and celebrating sunshine, by creating something lasting and beautiful from the raw materials of determination, work, and abiding love. And so they were remembered not as perfect people but as real ones, who had faced challenges and sometimes failed, who had known sorrow and loss, but who had never stopped choosing each other, never stopped believing in the life they were building together. Their legacy was not just land or money or even the many descendants who carried their blood, but the example they had set, the proof they had provided that true love was possible, that it could endure and even deepen through all the trials life inevitably brings. The ranch still stands, more than a century after Jamie bought that first piece of land. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the original 2 rooms remain, preserved as they were when Elena and Jamie first lived there. Visitors can see Elena's workroom with examples of her leather craft on display. They can sit on the porch where she and Jamie spent so many evenings together. They can walk down to the creek and stand where Jamie proposed. And if they are lucky, if they listen carefully, they might almost hear it. The echo of laughter, the murmur of voices speaking of dreams and plans, the sound of 2 people who found each other against all odds and built something that would outlast them both, something precious and enduring and true. A love story that began with raw fingers and gentle care, that was nurtured through hard work and unwavering commitment, that flourished across decades and continues still in the hearts and lives of those who came after. A simple story of a cowboy and a seamstress, of salve and tenderness, of promises made and kept. A story as timeless as the prairie sky, as enduring as the land itself, as real and precious as love at its very best. And in that small cemetery on the rise, 2 headstones stand side by side, bearing simple inscriptions: Jamie Farrell, 1853 to 1915. Beloved husband, father, and friend, he kept his promises. Elena Morales Farrell, 1853 to 1920. Beloved wife, mother, and artist, she built beauty from strength. But to those who knew their story, those words were merely footnotes. The true inscription was written in the land they had tended, the family they had raised, the love they had shared so openly that it became a light for others to follow. Their story was not ended but transformed, living on in every act of kindness, Every commitment honored, every moment when someone chose love over convenience, partnership over selfishness, faith over fear. They had started as strangers, two lonely people in a hard land. They had ended as legend, their love story told and retold, inspiring others to believe in possibility, to reach for connection, to trust that with courage and care, even the most damaged fingers could heal, even the loneliest heart could find its home.